Cinematic legend Mel Brooks turns 100 this year, so to celebrate I thought I'd rewatch all the films he directed. This is the first one, The Producers. My original introduction to The Producers was with the 2005 musical film. I then went back and rewatched this, and if I'm honest, I think I prefer the musical version. The storyline is a brilliant one, trying to make the worst thing possible and have everyone love it. And I do think all the cast are superb here. Mostel and Wilder have great chemistry, and Kenneth Mars is perfectly over the top as Franz. There's a fantastic quote from Brooks he says in the making of documentary, where he describes Mostel's performance by saying, "A lot of actors hide in their characters, but in Max, a lot of Zero came out." That seems true, as he's incredibly charismatic in this, and his delivery of the line, "Where did I go right?" is superb. The line in the trial though, "incredibly guilty," is one of the greatest lines in comedy movie history. And there are plenty of quotable lines in this. In terms of the best part of the film, the musical number in the show is superb, and the audience reaction is hilarious. This is the one part that is better than the Broadway musical, as in that, as you've already seen several songs, it slightly lessens its impact, but here it is out of nowhere and hits perfectly. One underrated aspect of this, I also think, is Brooks' direction. Much has been said about his strength as writing, but I just think this is a really well-made film. The scene where Wilder agrees to join in on the scam and the fountain goes off in the background is just beautifully shot. On the downside, I do think the pacing is slightly off in the final act. Up until the musical is a hit, it's great. Then the side story of them trying to blow up the theatre, it does lull slightly, and it's not really needed. I also think it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of how the humour has aged, and some bits haven't aged the best. There are some of the gay stereotypes that feel very dated now, and Ula is well performed by Lee Meredith, but it would be nicer if she had a bit of a bigger role, more than just looking good dancing. There is also a lot of wacky characters in this, and they're all well performed, but I think the musical did a better job by removing the character of LSD and instead splitting his part out over Franz and Roger. The influence this film has had though is undeniable. In particular, when watching this, I couldn't help but get a sense of similarities to this and some of the work from the South Park people and Book of Mormon. Overall then, this is a highly impressive directorial debut. I believe it is rightly heralded as one of the greatest comedies of the 60s, and there are few people as talented as Brooks who could not only make a hugely influential comedy, but then even had the audacity to remake it as an even more spectacular piece of entertainment decades later. As a film, I'll give this one 8 out of 10. This is the second film in my rewatch of Mel Brooks. This is The 12 Chairs. My thoughts on this are a bit of a mixed bag. For the good, I thought that Ron Moody is superb, and the chemistry between him and Frank Langella feels genuine. I have only really known Frank Langella as an older actor, so I didn't know what he looked like when he was young, and was shocked to see how dashing he is. He's like the 1970s Jacob Elordi or something. He felt perfectly suited as the charming rogue. On to the third lead, and Dom DeLuise gives the wackiest performance of the three, but he still manages to restrain it just enough to fit in with the rest of the film. Also, I know it's pretty much just a cameo, but Mel Brooks was great in his small role, and he does, what sounds to me at least, a pretty good accent in the film. I liked seeing him in a role that was pretty different than what he would become known for playing later in his career. So I like the cast, but if you had to say one thing that impressed me most in this film, it is again the direction and cinematography. Brooks really is underrated as a director. The scene where Hippolyte and Ostap are trekking to find the last chair, they cover various different terrains and weather, and it just looks stunning. There were bits in this that did make me think that if Brooks didn't go down the comedy route, he has the directing eye that could have made some amazing dramas. It's especially evident in the more serious parts of this film. The final thing that I will praise is, the laughs aren't as consistent as The Producers in this, but when they happen, there were some bits that genuinely made me laugh. The two that stick out most to me are Ron Moody walking on and off stage when he was pretending to be an actor, and Ron Moody walking across a tightrope. They're just both gloriously filmed and acted. In terms of what didn't quite work for me, the film balances comedy and drama a lot more than probably all of Brooks' other films combined, and I think it may have been stronger just to pick one lane and go with that. Surprisingly, I think this would have worked better as a straight-up drama in the end, with some more naturalistic humour rather than having the Benny Hill-style fast-forward chase every now and then. Despite that, I did find the pacing better here than The Producers, and the action moves a lot quicker, not holding on some scenes for too long. Overall then, I think this film is better made than The Producers, but as a viewing experience, it's one that I enjoy, but not quite as much as that. I'm giving this one a still enjoyable 6 out of 10. This is Blazing Saddles. This is a film that deals heavily with racism, and I'm obviously not the best person to comment on this, and not really in a position to argue about it from a nuanced point of view. I'll not focus on it too much then, but one thing I do think that Brooks did well when tackling the topic was that Richard Pryor was one of the co-writers of this. Having a black American having an input on the script dealing with racism. Although it seems like a common sense idea, it seems quite forward thinking for the 70s. I mean, there's still films from recent years that try to tackle racism and don't do this. Richard Pryor was also considered for the lead, and there are various stories online about why this fell through. I do really like Richard Pryor, but watching this again, from the moment Cleavon Little opens his mouth and sings I Get a Kick Out of You in the first scene, he just oozes charisma right from the start and is perfect. And I do think all the cast is great here. Gene Wilder is lovable as ever, as the one nice person that Bart meets. Madeline Kahn pretty much steals the whole show with a small role, and Harvey Korman is superb, hamming it up just the right amount as a villain. Madeline Kahn and Harvey Korman will go on to feature in a few Brooks films coming on, and they really just gel well with his style. Even lots of the side characters in this get time to shine. Brooks is really good at getting people to pop with limited screen time. The pacing of the film is also great, it really whizzes by. At times it feels like sketches strung together, but they do have a high hit rate and there are several big laughs. I know it's an overdone argument people like to say this couldn't be made today, but it kinda was a few years ago with Django Unchained clearly being influenced by it. And it actually was remade 4 years ago as a kids film, Paws of Fury. This still has the racism message hidden beneath the story of cats and dogs, but I was surprised how closely it stuck to the story beats. Again, I also think Mel Brooks really shines as a director. It is as well made as the best westerns, and that really adds a level to the absurd jokes, making them land even funnier. In terms of the ending, I know the ridiculousness of it can be a bit divisive, but I love it. The dafter it gets, the funnier I find it. It is also a genuinely good story for a film. This could have worked being told completely straight. I know in recent years spoofs have just devolved into unconnected scenes lampooning whatever is popular for 5 minutes. But this is a careful craft of the western genre. It is as good a western as it is a spoof, and that makes it feel timeless. Finally, for my good points, the music is also superb. I'm Tired by Madeline Kahn is incredible. There's so many double entendres, I'm sure even Sabrina Carpenter might tell her to tone it down a bit. With what I didn't like, there's not that much. Some jokes might have dated a bit. With the jokes about racism, I always felt the heart was in the right place, and the intended target is always with the racist. There are one or two bits and jokes I don't think are as focused and land as well, like the backstory for Bart and the side plot with Mel Brooks as a Native American chief. This just didn't fit in with the rest of the story and could have been lifted out. For a film over 50 years old though, that is about race, this could have aged a heck of a lot worse. There are films from only 20 years ago that feel more dated in attitudes to me than this. I'm giving this one a really high 9 out of 10. The fourth Mel Brooks film that I'm covering is 1974's Young Frankenstein. I'll start this just by being honest and saying that I love this film. It may be my favourite Brooks yet. The cast are all superb, but it's probably Wilder's best ever role. He is so manic and over the top, but the scene in particular where he tells people not to open the door no matter how much he screams, only to go in and start screaming for them to open the door, had me struggling to breathe. I was laughing so much. The script is really superb by both him and Brooks. Similar to Blazing Saddles, where that had a script strong enough that it could have been a western on its own without being a comedy, it's the same here. There have been countless adaptations of Mary Shelley's story, so much so that we all know it, but this is the best I've ever seen it told. In terms of the humour, I also admire the variety. Marty Feldman has lots of fourth wall breaks, and there are parts with some innuendo that feels like it should be more at home in a carry-on film. There is also some great physical comedy, especially Wilder stabbing his own leg, and there are brilliant comedy set pieces with the bookcase turning, and it also has wild over-the-top characters such as Inspector Kemp who still fit in with this world. There really does feel like something for everyone here. All of this, I feel, is encapsulated by the Putting on the Ritz performance, which is just a classic scene in cinema history. For the supporting cast, Peter Boyle is superb, but I think just about everyone nails their part. If I had to single someone out other than Wilder though, it would be Madeline Kahn. She only has a small role, but is incredibly impactful, and she just looks right in this era. She really can play any part. Talking about this era as well, I haven't covered yet, but the film is entirely in black and white, and the cinematography is incredible. I keep harping on about Brooks being an underrated director, but just the variety of his films he's done so far. He's like the comedy Stanley Kubrick. They all look and feel so different, yet maintain his own humour and style. In terms of the bad, there's not really that much. I was a bit concerned when the monster took Elizabeth into the woods. I think I'd remembered it being a bit more problematic in my memory, but it turned out not to be anywhere near as bad as I remembered. And overall, I think this is just a bona fide classic. It absolutely blows my mind that Brooks made this and Blazing Saddles in the same year. Both are rightly considered classics and two of the funniest films ever, and it's crazy they came out so close together yet are so different films. I think it's on par as an achievement as when Spielberg made Jurassic Park and Schindler's List in the same year. I don't think I can give this film anything else other than 10 out of 10. On to the fifth Mel Brooks film, and it's 1976's Silent Movie. Watching these films in close succession, this is by no means a bad film, but it is undoubtedly a step down for me following the back-to-back classics of Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein. For the good, there is some good slapstick comedy here, and it's hard not to admire the attempt to try something so different. I always enjoy it when directors use their swag to go for a big swing, even if it doesn't quite work. When the slapstick works, it really works. There is a scene with the head of Engulf and Devour trying and failing multiple times to put on a jacket, and it just feels like a classic silent comedy routine. The level of cameos in it is also undoubtedly impressive, and the meta storyline of Mel trying to make a silent movie with them, whilst being in a silent movie with them, is a fun one. I think the three leads also have great chemistry. I've praised Mel as a director and writer for his previous films, but he also does a great job as the lead, and I just find him funny. There is a regular joke here where he's clearly saying something ruder if you read his lips, but then the subtitle card says something milder, and it made me laugh each time. I also thought Marty Feldman gave a great physical performance, flinging himself around everywhere. Best of all was also probably Bernadette Peters, who steals the film once she appears. Finally, I can't help but praise the music in the film. Having no dialogue in the film relies heavily on this, and it is constantly entertaining and suits whatever is happening, without ever overshadowing the action. In terms of what didn't work for me, the film is just very hit or miss. The film feels more like a series of sketches strung together than an actual script. Some of these work, like a funny joke with Marty watching two dogs for two different people, one's a guide dog and the other's not, and then getting them mixed up when he gives them back. But then some just don't, especially the bit with Mel drunk in an alley being named Lord of the Winos. It just didn't feel very funny at all. There are also some bits that have obviously aged very badly, with a regular joke where the three hug and then a slur appears as a dialogue card. I also wasn't a huge fan of all the jokes around Marty being creepy with women, and most of the jokes for Dom end up just being about his weight. I mean, he's big in terms of an actor, but he's not even that big a guy in this, and it just feels a bit lazy. Although I do understand it must be hard to write material without dialogue. In terms of the cameos, these are a mixed bag too. Best of all is Anne Bancroft, who was Mel's real-life wife, and he's genuinely really funny. But then others, like the Liza Minnelli one, she doesn't really get anything to do other than be there whilst everyone else falls over. I will praise the Marcel Marceau joke though, as that was a brilliant gag. Again, I thought that Brooks was good behind the camera, and he undoubtedly knows how to film a slapstick gag, but it always feels like a silent film made in the 70s. With Blazing Saddles, that felt like a real western, and Young Frankenstein felt it was filmed in the era of the classic horror. I do wish he'd have gone all out and filmed this more in the style of a classic silent movie, and had it actually feel like it was made in the 20s. This still has several laughs though, and as I mentioned earlier, I appreciate the big swing. Out of all the films so far, this one felt the most like Mel Brooks made it for Mel Brooks, rather than the general audience. I think I'll give this one 6 out of 10. Next up is 1977's High Anxiety. I am aware that rewatching the previous films, my opinion tends to fall within the general consensus. I think this is the first one where I differ, as although most consider this to be mid-tier Brooks at best, I genuinely love this film and it's easily in his top 3 for me. I think this is an underrated comedy, and I put it in the same bracket as Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein. I think part of this may be that I do enjoy Hitchcock films myself, and I think this does a great job of capturing the feel of one despite being a comedy. And the other is just a more personal reason, but this is one of my dad's favourite films, and I have lots of memories seeing this several times growing up and remember all the bits he laughs at. In terms of what works, the thing I need to single out here is the direction. Brooks just does an incredible job mimicking Hitchcock, and it's masterful. The whole thing looks amazing. There's also one scene that's maybe my favourite visual gag in any Brooks film. When Harvey Korman and Cloris Leachman are having a conversation, the camera is under a glass table, but they keep putting things on it, so the camera has to keep moving to try and film them. It's just incredibly well choreographed and filmed, and really funny. The second strong part is the cast. Brooks is brilliant as the lead here, and I think if this film should have won at least one award, it should have been for Best Song. Him singing High Anxiety is just perfection, both with his delivery and Madeleine Kahn's reactions to it. On to Kahn, and it's only about the halfway point she comes into the film, but like always she pretty much steals the entire thing. She's one of the greatest comedic performers in cinema history. One scene in particular, Mel phones her, but gets attacked by braces. Whilst the scuffle is going on, she thinks she's getting a dirty phone call, and she acts it perfectly. Then there's Harvey Korman, who is maybe the best there is at playing a prim and proper idiot. He matches his Blazing Saddles performance here. Then, on to the final great performance, Leachman as Diesel is brilliantly over the top, and her death scene is fantastic. The final area to deserve praise is the script. Modern spoof films tend to just throw random scenes together, with not much story, but this works, as although it is heavily inspired by Hitchcock films, it still works as a story on its own you can follow. There are some obvious spoof scenes, like with the birds, and a very funny bit to recreate the psycho shower scene, but they still fit within the narrative, they're not just random bits thrown in. In terms of what doesn't work, I can't say there is much. If I was highly critical, I'd say it does take a while to get going and get into its groove, but then once it does, the jokes are pretty constant. And the back half, especially when Kahn appears, is just great cinema. I'm aware this is a bit more controversial take, but I genuinely love this film, and I'm giving it 9 out of 10. And it's 1981's The History of the World Part 1. I remember seeing this growing up and finding it funny, but as an adult I enjoyed it nowhere near as much. For the good, the direction is again superb and varied. The Spanish Inquisition part is really well staged, and you definitely get the idea that Mel Brooks wanted to do a big musical sequence like this for some time. The French Revolution bit also looks sumptuous. With how it was shot, it reminded me of Barry Lyndon. Also, when the jokes hit, they do hit. The Moses joke was short, but I did laugh, and like always, the film is dubbed by Madeleine Kahn, who is hilarious with every line. Unfortunately though, onto the bad, there is a lot more I didn't like this time. The humour is a lot more sexual than previous films, and not pleasant in most bits. Brooks had plenty of sexual jokes in the past, but this reminds me of the later Carry On films, where they got rid of the innuendos and just tackled it head on, and it's just not as funny. The King in the final segment just groping every woman, and the whole chess scene that he has just isn't enjoyable to watch. I think that the shorter jokes like Moses or the Spanish Inquisition work better than the long bits. Just going through them all, the 2001 spoof wasn't for me. The Stone Age had its moments, but not many, and went on too long. The Moses part was great. The Roman Empire did go on too long, but the actors were all good in this, and there were a few laughs, although also quite a few misses. The Spanish Inquisition I liked. I especially found it funny with the monks showing their legs dancing. That's just good comedy. The French Revolution I didn't really like other than Harvey Korman. He corrects everyone mispronouncing his name in a callback to Blazing Saddles, which I enjoyed. But there just seemed a nastiness to some of the jokes in this part. Then for the previews, these were quick fire and fine. And Using Space definitely feels like a teaser for what film will be coming next. And the tune they sing will also be reused brilliantly in another future film coming up. I think this is my least favourite from Brooks so far. It's hard to do a sketch comedy stretched out over the course of film. And although this looks great and has brilliant sets and costumes, it's not my favourite of his. I think I'll give this one 5 out of 10. It's not bad, and it's worth seeing for some of the big laughs, but it's not one that I'll revisit often. Film 8 from Mel Brooks is 1987's SpaceBalls. Watching this film growing up, I didn't like it too much, and on a rewatch I immediately realised why. It's Pizza the Hut. They look horrific, and it scared me back then. Viewing as an adult though, I was pleasantly surprised. Like High Anxiety, it seems to be spoofing something with a genuine affection, and you can feel the joy in it. The sets, costumes and models are all also superb, and it's a good looking movie. There aren't many returning Brooks regulars here, but all of the new cast do well. I do wish Sean Candy had more to do, but I was happy just seeing him, and every time his ears pricked up or his tail wagged, it was just funny. Like all great spoofs, it works as well because it has its own story. It's obviously very similar to Star Wars, but it's not just random jokes, it's one you can follow. There are some spoofs of different science fiction films sprinkled in, but they all fit within the plot well. The best joke of all is near the end, with John Hurt making a cameo and recreating his alien chestburst scene. I didn't know that he had it in him for a second time. The humour also seems less cruel than History of the World. The president in this is again a sex-obsessed moron, and Brooks plays that incredibly well, but the jokes always seem to be on him, rather than on the cruel acts he does, which works a lot better. It might be that I went into this with low expectations, or it might be that this is genuinely one of the best films that he's made, and I could put this in Brooks' top tier. It is missing some of the biggest belly laughs of some of the other films, but it is consistently funny throughout. And although I like Bill Pullman, a more natural comedian in this Han Solo Luke Skywalker combined role could have made it something even more special. I think I'll give this 8 out of 10. This would be film 9 in my Mel Brooks rewatch series, but this one isn't actually a rewatch as I'd never seen it before. This is 1991's Life Stinks. This film is a bit of a mixed bag, but I did enjoy seeing Brooks make a more traditional comedy and not a spoof for the first time since 12 Chairs. For the good, I love the opening few minutes of the film that follows Goddard's feet. It's just well shot and a unique start. I also appreciate how quickly the story gets into gear. It doesn't waste much time before the bet is started and we are on the way. In terms of Brooks saying this is his best performance, he is really good in this, and I thought both he and Leslie Ann Warren do a fantastic job. They both had good moments where they had to act things, and also good moments where they were reacting to what the other one did. My favourite scene was also the dance number between the two. They just have great chemistry together. When I watched Silent Movie, my least favourite bit was the King of the Winos joke, as it just didn't feel right. And this movie does a much better job of portraying rough sleepers. It's still not perfect, but for a film that's 35 years old, it does feel like they had the intentions in the right place. In terms of what doesn't work, the script does feel sloppy in parts. Jeffrey Tambor bought Mel's house in 2 days. I've bought a house and you can never get anything done in that time, it's laughable. The whole time frames in the film don't really make sense. You never get the feeling he's there for 30 days, and at the end, how long did it take to build the development? You never really feel the time passing. I just thought all the bit around Goddard being screwed over as well could have been handled better, and they could have planted seeds for it earlier. It seems too big a stretch they could just get everything from him. They say power of attorney is used, but it just seems like it couldn't happen. This is possibly the Brooks film with the lowest jokes per minute count, and if I'm honest, there was only one that made me laugh, which was the part with Sailor's Ashes that reminded me of The Big Lebowski. I do wonder if that was influenced by this. The other main flaw is not really with this film, it's just that Trading Places exists. This film feels very similar to that, but it's not as good as that, so you can't help but wish you were watching that instead. Still, even if this ends up being one of the worst films in Brooks' filmography, it's still not a bad film, just an okay one. I mean, this is far better than the worst film of other renowned directors. I think I'll give this film a solid 5 out of 10. On to the penultimate film of revisiting Mel Brooks. This is Robin Hood, Men in Tights. Growing up, if I'd had to give a review of this film then, I'd have said it was the funniest film in the world. I watched this on video so much that I knew it word for word. Revisiting it now a couple of decades later, I don't quite have the same reaction, but there is still plenty I do like. Starting with the good, and the main cast in this are all fantastic. Richard Lewis is great as the Prince. Roger Rees looks like Alan Rickman, but he matches his manic energy perfectly. His character has a quirk where he says words in the wrong order, and he delivers these brilliantly every time. Then it is on to Robin and Marion, and I'm not exaggerating here, but even though this is a spoof film, I genuinely believe Cary Elwes is the best ever film Robin Hood. He can swashbuckle like Errol Flynn, he's ridiculously charming, and he could have played this role completely straight and it would have been equally as brilliant. My biggest laugh at him in this film comes when he cuts the rope holding a chandelier to land on some men, but he cuts the wrong one and it lands on him. It works so well as a gag, due to the preceding action of it being him being genuinely terrific with a sword. I also think that Amy Yazbek is perfect as Marion. The chemistry she has with Elwes is undeniable, and every joke she delivers she nails. There are some really big laughs. Robin and Marion behind a curtain, and the shadow looking like something much ruder. This is a good gag, and it seems very similar to one years later in Austin Powers 2. Maybe it inspired that. The fourth wall breaks are also well done. When Robin announces he has another shot in the contest, everyone checks the script, and that feels like classic Brooks. In strong Mel Brooks tradition as well, there is also a musical number, singing the title song that is incredibly catchy. It is a very similar tune, or well, pretty much the exact same tune as the Jews in Space number from History of the World Part 1, but it still works perfectly here. Another thing that works is the film has a big cast, maybe too big, but there are some small characters who Brooks allows to be hilarious with limited screen time. Robert Ridgely reprises his hangman role from Blazing Saddles and is brilliantly weird. And Dick Van Patten plays the abbot officiating the wedding, and his reaction to getting shouted at walking down the aisle makes me laugh every time. I also enjoyed what have become running jokes at this point in Brooks' films, with the walk this way and it's good to be king, and even Richard acting shocked that he has a mole and it changing position echoed similar jokes with Igor's hump in Young Frankenstein. That's the good, but then what didn't work for me? Like I said, lots of the humour works, and I did enjoy the references to Blazing Saddles, especially at the end by Dave Chappelle. What I didn't really like though was the other film and pop culture references, as I feel these date the film more than Brooks' earlier work. There's a Home Alone spoof and references to celebrities at the time like Larry King, and they just feel out of place. Lots of the film works, as although spoofing Robin Hood, Elwes played the character very different to Kevin Costner, and it felt more like a general spoof of the entire Robin Hood story and not just one film, which made the other references stand out more. I could maybe give Dom DeLuise a pass for appearing in a Godfather spoof, as that fit the narrative, and it was a good impression, but I still think I could have done without it. The other thing I wasn't a fan of, that went over my head as a child, is some of the sexual jokes are a bit mean in this one. Overall, it might not be my favourite Brooks film like it was when I was growing up, but it did still make me laugh several times and features several great performances all round. Also, if you ask me to close my eyes and picture Robin Hood and Maid Marian, I do genuinely think of Cary Elwes and Amy Yazbek before anyone else. So to have my definitive versions of these characters appear in a spoof film, then Brooks must have done something right. For my ranking on this film, I give it a very respectable 7 out of 10. This is the 11th and last film in my Mel Brooks rewatch. This is 1995's Dracula, Dead and Loving It. This is another film I have fond memories of growing up like Men in Tights. If you'd have asked me when I was 10 years old, I would have given this 10 out of 10. As an adult though, it's a bit different. For the good, the film looks superb. It's again well directed, and the costumes and lighting are just incredible. Several characters, especially Amy Yazbek, just have their face illuminated whenever they appear, and she looks like she walked right out of classic Hollywood. Whereas Young Frankenstein worked brilliantly in black and white, this also works superb in colour, and for a family-friendly film there's quite a lot of blood, but always in a funny way. In terms of the cast, there are two definite MVPs for me. Amy Yazbek is a joy to see, and some of the funniest moments involve her. The other standout for me is Peter MacNicol. With this and Being the Movie, I just loved him as a kid for both of these, and his manic energy suits the film perfectly. Also fun is Harvey Korman as always. He plays it a bit more straight in this film than in previous, but it's still a joy to watch. And lastly, onto Mel himself, he's just having a great time in this. The scene with Van Helsing and Dracula trying to have the last word is a particular highlight. Then it's on to Leslie Nielsen himself. I'm a big fan of his, and although good here, I don't feel like it's his strongest work. He could have been a bit more serious and menacing, which would have made the daft things funnier, but he's playing it a bit too silly for me. What do I know though, he is a legend of the genre, so I could just be wrong. I also enjoyed how closely it stuck to the Dracula story, and it didn't do what annoys me with spoofs where they just throw in random references to other films that don't fit in. It is told so closely. I do think this cast could have done a very good serious Dracula, and I do wish that we got to see Brooks do a serious film once in his career. In terms of what doesn't work, there isn't just the barrage of jokes here that Brooks often does. There are scenes that genuinely make me laugh, like Dracula hypnotising Mina and Essie badly. But strangely for a Brooks film, this can go for a few minutes every now and then with no gags, and then suddenly one happens and I remember like, oh yeah, this is a spoof. Maybe it's nostalgia, but I do like this more than most other people seem to do. I think I'll give this 7 out of 10. That's the last Mel Brooks review then, or at least for now unless he directs another. I have enjoyed them though, and rewatching them all, I do stand by the opinion that he's a massively underrated director, and it's been a pleasure to see these again. Thanks Mel. Cheers.
And remember, folks, be good to your parents. They've been good to you. You win!